Welcome back to the Argyle CX UX Leadership Forum. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions during the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator. Today, our moderator is Tracy Kuchar, who is Building Experience Manager with Industrious. We're excited to have Tracy and our panelists for a panel discussion called, Is Your CX a Fixer-Upper? Using Marketing Data to Find Areas for Improvement. Welcome, panel. Tracy, over to you.
Eric, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you're joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome Vimeta Bhatnagar from BD and Kim Ho from Corebridge Financial. Vimeta and then Kim, can you please briefly introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your roles?
Sure. My name is Vimeta Bhatnagar, and I work at BD. BD is a large medical device and life science company. I head digital marketing and e-commerce for BD Biosciences. I have over 20 years of experience in digital marketing, e-commerce, and demand gen. And I have worked in several industries, including tech companies, finance, healthcare, startups, and manufacturing. And my experience has usually been in UX and CX side. And so I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, great. Welcome. And Kim, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Kim Ho. I work as part of Corebridge Financial. We recently did a spin-off of AIG. So we sell life insurance, annuities, group retirement. I've sort of been all over my career, but internal consulting for several years and then customer insights for the last 6 years. In my role as senior director, I oversee the voice of the customer program. So everything between responsible for day-to-day survey implementation, gathering, reporting on insights. And really, I think my main job is interacting with business stakeholders and getting them to act on all of the great work that we do. And a passion of mine is also DEIB and employee engagement. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Kim, I'd love for you to kick us off as well. There are lots of different types of marketing and related data out there. How do you prioritize what type of data to use at Corebridge Financial?
Good question, because at Corebridge Financial, there's so much data, especially insurance. You can imagine all the data that we collect. And so in the past, I would say 6 to 9 months, we've really honed in on finding the data that makes the most sense for us and the data that we know that business stakeholders want to know more about. And so there's a couple of things that we take into consideration when we do, I'm going to call them deep dives. So going beyond just reporting like monthly and quarterly KPIs. First thing is it representative of our entire book of business? The last thing we want to do is do all of this analysis around survey data in a vacuum, only to hear people say, well, that doesn't represent our customers, such a small end size, or the time duration is not recent enough, things have changed so much. And so we really focus on that and say, okay, let's flip it a little bit and start with more data and then focus on CX towards the end. So some of the data that we do use is call data. It's huge for us. We have call topics, call duration, repeat callers, and that represents our entire book, who's calling in about what. We have operational data such as turnaround time. Once someone submits an application, how long does it take for them to actually get it issued? We have underwriting class. Metadata is really important for us, so connecting all of it to what channel are they from, what product are they buying, how old are they, their market segment. And then we have engagement data. So did they interact with our website? Did they interact with an advisor? All that comes together. And I think for us in our team, the important part is finding the right filter. So which set, what combination of data is going to drive the story.
Yeah, Vimeta, same question. How do you prioritize data at BD? Are any overlap with what Kim has described?
Yeah, so we are a really large organization, and there's a lot of data and it's coming in. And so I think it's really important to understand, how do you prioritize that data that is coming in, and how do you use it to make an impact? So for us, ours is an e-commerce site. So we look at a lot of the data, how users are interacting with our website. We have obviously the regular KPIs that we have. But really, what we try to kind of do is, what type of data has the most impact, right? So really figuring out what that data looks like, and then utilizing that for making decisions, whether it's bug fixes. Or so on an e-commerce site, you usually want to address some of those things that really have an impact on the revenue. So we look at everything from a revenue perspective, that, okay, these are the features, or this data will really help grow the revenue. So that's kind of what our process is, at least for my team. But, from a data perspective, yes, there are lots of different types of data. We also work closely with the customer service team and get their input on a regular basis, because, they are the first people who, when they are upset, they will get a call. And so it's really important to keep that team in mind and get information from them as you prioritize.
Are you able to share an example of one of those really big impact pieces that you mentioned?
Yeah, so, search is one for e-commerce. Search is really, really critical. And, we get a lot of feedback about search, both good and bad. So that is something that, we continuously work closely with our customer service team and really make changes to the search on a constant basis, so that we are, addressing the needs of our customers who call in.
Yeah. I want to talk now about some of the aspects of CX that the marketing and related data does not support. So Kim, if you could take the lead here, talk to us about some of these areas and share some of your recommendations on other ways companies can dig in and get a better understanding of their customers' point of view.
Sure. So I'll sort of build on my example earlier around call center, because that's such a big interaction piece for us. And so, we recently did a deep dive, and we started with call center surveys first. So as I talked about before, we categorize a topic for every time someone calls in, the duration, the sentiment. So we started there, and we started to see, okay, who's calling in? How old are they? Are they calling in multiple times? We have information around, are they contributing or not? Are they working with an advisor? And we spent a lot of time just trying to understand the data and trying to understand hotspots, because what we found in our team is that you can't just do a data dump from your business stakeholders. You really have to find that story and craft it. And so we ended up on finding the hotspot of pre-retirees, so those 59.5 to 72, because in our world they can move their money penalty free, and that's the group that we want to retain. And so we focused there, and then we did a deep dive and say, okay, what are they calling about? What are they calling most often about? And then what is their experience when they are calling? Which topics are resulting in the most detractors? And so based on that specific filter, we saw that, they're calling about withdrawals, and it was increasing in terms of the volume, and the NPS was decreasing. And we just took that example, and we fed it all the way through. We worked with other business stakeholders to understand what was going on. Trying to uncover pain points, but really we spent a lot of time trying to find that right specific filter, and it landed. We ended up reporting it to our leadership team, and I think that was the key for us is, what group should we focus on? How can we take the data and find the key hotspots?
Great. How long did that whole process take you?
Oh, man, I'm lucky. I have a team of data scientists, and so we all bring our own, set of competencies. So I would say maybe 4 to 6 weeks from gathering data to, talking to business stakeholders, crafting the story, presenting it. We're probably on the 6th weekend, but I'm really proud of the work. It got a lot of engagement from stakeholders, which is what we want, right? Not for them to really listen and understand and ask more questions, and we're continuing to monitor it. So I would say, the work paid off.
Great, that's a great example. Vameta, can you share some of your experience here? Any area that you find the marketing data may fall short of providing the insights that you need?
Yeah, so I'll focus more on the operational side of it, because a lot of times, that is not really part of marketing data. But I think that, that operational data is also really critical. And, ours is an e-commerce site, so having, everything run smoothly is really critical. So implementing, site monitoring tools or performance tools, which really can, really impact the customer experience, right? So supposing your website is not running smoothly, there's downtime, and it's people will leave really quickly. So looking at that data and really utilizing that to improve the performance of the website on a continuous basis is something that is really critical from a customer experience perspective.
Great, thank you. I'd like to move on to talking about how to get to one source of truth. Kim, we get this question a lot from people. Can you talk to us about what you do if your company's marketing data is fragmented among several different databases, beginning with some of the first steps someone might be able to take in this situation?
Sure. So first off, I'm not a data scientist. I'm lucky to work with some really great ones. So I will sort of, talk about some of the lessons learned throughout the way. But I would say the first thing is to find that one common denominator that you can use to trace all the data together. So for us, it would be policy number, customer ID, or social. Those are the three sort of pieces of data that are critical. Two is, I would say, put in the work. There's a lot of work at the front end to get the data in the right place, cleaned up, define and document it. That's so important for us. Once we find something, we have to define what it means and make sure everyone is on the same page, because invariably people come back and say, oh, what does that really mean? Like, how do you support that number? And then hopefully find the source of data. So for us, our team is able to use, we use R and Python. We're able to connect to the source data. So whether that's an admin system or a data warehouse like Snowflake, we do all that work on the front end so that, as they continue to ask for more data updates, which they always will, we have all of that ready for us. And then third, I think the advice I would give is sometimes you just have to make the call and defend the rationale behind it. So for example, we have a lot of call center data, and a really key piece is, are they calling in multiple times about the same call? But we don't have a flag in the system that just automatically says that. Our team had to come up with a definition. If someone calls within 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, like, what is a repeat caller? And so they just, drew a line in the sand and said, this is a repeat caller, this is the definition, and this is how we're going to report it. And it's worked for us, but we had to take the initiative and the lead to do that.
Great. Vameta, you shared that this is a work in progress at BD. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey and some advice for others that might be in the same place?
Yeah, sure. So it's like I said, BD is a really large company, and there's lots of different data. And so that's why I think, it's really important to have, a single source of truth. And without a single source of truth, you really can't trust your data enough to turn it into any insights. And so one of the projects that we are kind of working towards is to combine all of that data and have a single source of truth. And some of the technologies that we've been looking at is CDP, which is a customer data platform, or data layer or data warehouse, as Kim was saying. So CDP obviously, is it helps you capture data from every customer interaction and consolidate the data into a centralized place, right? And you can use the user profiles and connect the right data to the right people. So I think so the way that we are going about doing that is obviously gathering, requirements, first of all, also kind of pitching that to the senior executives so that they understand why single source of truth is so critical nowadays for improving your customer experience. And so going, really forming a big business case within the company, really trying to sell why it is so critical to have a single source of truth, and then obviously implementing technologies. So we've started around, and so we have agreement that that's something that is needed, and we are working towards that.
And what was the team that initiated that? Is that something that your team on the CX side were the ones that spearheaded that within your organization, or is it another one of your colleagues in another department? How do you work cross-functionally?
Yeah, so it was started by another team in another department, but they ran into some issues, and so now it's become so it's become I'm going to be managing that, and but it's going to be a much larger project because you need IT's involvement, you need a lot of the product team's involvement. So the whole company really needs to be bought into that program. That's why it is critical to have something like that, because it touches every team. So that's kind of what I'm excited about, because we've started that process and we are moving towards that.
Yeah, was there one incident or one thing that kind of prompted you to say, like, this is the time where now we need to work towards this single source of truth? One painful experience or something that that gave you the leverage you needed to build that stakeholder case you were talking about?
Absolutely. So, a lot of times what ends up happening, we are collecting a lot of data. The different teams have a lot of data. And one of the challenges is that, a lot of these things, if you don't have a centralized place, you have to go and do things manually. You have to ask for data, then you have to put it in and so we've been doing a lot of that. And that it's not a very efficient process. And so that is one of the things that really, everyone feels the pain. And so I think everyone is bought into that process that, that if we have, a single source of truth, it will really help us make, better decisions and just the whole team to be more efficient. And from a customer experience perspective, unless you're able to get a 360 view of your customers, you will never really make the best decision, right? So I think it's really important to have that kind of 360 view of your customer, and you really cannot have that unless you have a single source of truth.
Yeah, thank you. Kim, I want to go back to you on this one. We hear from a lot of people that after they get through the data, it's really hard to know how to prioritize CX issues. Probably because the data reveals so many different issues, right, that to tackle. So any advice on how to sort through what needs to be fixed immediately, what can be on the back burner, and any examples of projects that you've worked on would be great.
So we're actually right smack in the middle of doing this right now, leveraging that work that I talked about with the call center data. That work came out as well as a relationship survey, and the results weren't great. And so they formed a task force to address, some of the main issues that our customers were facing. Just so happens we just, went through an IPO, and so we are going through lots of challenges in terms of expense management. We have to hit targets, and so my first piece of recommendation is, what are the goals and challenges and the constraints of the moment for the business? And so having that context and understanding, why people make decisions around budget is really huge for us. And so, right now the task force, we came together, they came up with 40 ideas, and obviously we can't do all of it, and we don't have money or time or people to do all of it. And we had to get to 5 or 6. And so the filters that we came up with was first customer impact. So the percentage of customers impacted. Is it going to impact 100%, 50%, 20%? That was one filter. The second filter was around effort. Is it going to take 3, 6, 12 months? Is it, 2-year roadmap? What is it? And then is it less or greater than 50K? That's sort of the sweet spot for us, something we can get done without a business case. And then the last thing right now was, does it require IT spend or not? And so using all of those filters, we found the quick wins. And obviously we worked on those first because we always want to show progress. But we also kept track of the big ticket items, but sometimes you just, the quick wins won't take you very far. And so, collecting a roadmap and knowing that we will have to build a business case eventually. And so, they can take a back burner, but don't lose track of them. And then I would say also we have to know the end in mind. So when we ask for budget, we need to be able to demonstrate the value. So knowing which KPIs, metrics to show success is really key. It always comes up in all of these conversations is, if I give you the money, how are you going to show success? And so that's always something that we focus on.
Yeah, so you talked about these filters.
Mhm.
How difficult was it to come up with those thresholds of what would be an acceptable number of customers that benefited from this improvement, or one of the other filters you mentioned?
Yeah, so the customer impact, I think for us was easy. Anything that hits 100% of customers is a no-brainer. It was the IT spend or not that was important to us, because right now in our current environment, we just don't have a lot of IT resources. So anything in that bucket was immediately that's 2024 roadmap, or it needs a business case. Actually, the filters are pretty easy. If you're engaging with the right business stakeholders, they know exactly what the pain points are and like what it's going to take to get budget approval. And so we use that from the get-go.
Great. And Vimeta, the same question. Can you tell us how you've prioritized CX issues, and if you have a similar type of methodology?
Yeah, so, I think the most important thing is to have some kind of a framework, so you can prioritize having a priority matrix where, so I usually kind of have impact and feasibility matrix where you kind of rank things based on if it's high importance, high impact, that would be a priority one. High importance and low impact could be a priority 2, and so forth. Low importance and low impact would be a priority 3. And so we do that, but we also, for us, it's also, it's an e-commerce site. So customer experience is really important. And, the revenue, we have different revenue targets for every quarter. And so hitting those is really important. So we also look at some of those features and functionality, and that really will enhance that the revenue, right? And a lot of those things have to actually do with the customer experience, because we did a redesign a couple of years back of our website, and prior to that, it was an e-commerce site, but there were lots of problems with the user experience. And ever since we've launched the site a couple of years back, we've seen a huge increase in the e-commerce portion. People are using it more, and the primary reason for that is that the user experience and the customer experience has improved significantly. We can see that. So prioritizing, for us, we look at all of the KPIs, the regular KPIs that you would look for e-commerce side, but also really putting it, every month we go through our categorization of which ones should go in a priority, right? So we do that every month, and then we select things that really will have an impact on the revenue. So that's how we go through that prioritization process.
Can you share with us some examples of the ones that made it through the process this month that you're going to be working on?
Yeah, so we usually have a lot of features that people will ask for a lot of things, and we have to kind of be very selective, because my team works really closely. We have developers, but also IT sources, because we, like Kim said, IT resources are sometimes a challenge for us as well. So really kind of figuring out which ones are the most critical to make. I think those are some of the things that so there will be things like quote functionality that is a new feature, and it really has a direct impact on our revenue. So usually those are some kind of those features are the ones that we will prioritize, although they might take a little bit longer, because you have to do integrations with your ERP system and those, but those are some things that we prioritize.
And anything that you've had to say no to recently?
Yes, we say no a lot, which people don't like. But sometimes it is just not possible because, it might take a really long time, or, like I said, based on the matrix, it might for a stakeholder, it might be, they work on that product. They say, oh, this is the most important thing. But when you look at all the other things, that is probably from a business perspective, not the most important thing. So, so we say no a lot to a lot of things, and we kind of go through, planning, categorization exercise at the beginning, and we will let the stakeholders know that, no, this will not go in this sprint, and we have to move to another sprint. So that happens a lot, but, people understand. But, generally, it's the process has worked well so far, but that's not to say that, yes, it is not easy. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions and say no to.
Well, Kim mentioned about having the right stakeholders in the room when you're making these decisions, and I think that's a really important point. Is that something that you've seen the benefit of as well?
Absolutely. So like I said, my team, we work with not just, it's a global team. So we work with all of the regions. So APAC, Europe, Latin America. So it's and, we have our own large platform teams. And so you really need to get the buy-in from all of them, and all of them really need to agree that, yes, from a business perspective, these are the few things that we absolutely need to implement. And so just getting that consensus and buy-in from all of the different stakeholders, global stakeholders, it's a process. And we start that process pretty early when we are planning for next year, right? So that we can get the buy-in and make sure that, people are okay with what we are prioritizing. But we try to involve all of the key stakeholders in that process. And I think it really makes a big difference, because it doesn't come as a surprise if you're kind of saying no to someone. They at least understand what the business priorities are.
Along that topic of buy-in and stakeholders, and really demonstrating the value of the CX work, Kim, maybe you can address this, because I think this is one of the things that most CX professionals struggle with at some point, demonstrating the value of their CX work. So I know it's a big topic, probably could have a whole panel just about this. What's your best advice for us here?
So this has been trial and error for us. We're definitely on a journey of trying to find that sweet spot. Prior to what we've been doing now, we tried to go a bit more formal. We set up a governance council where we had executive stakeholders, we had a working group, and we found that we weren't making as much progress as we thought we would. We didn't have a lot of items materialize in terms of making improvements. And so this year we opted for a bit more BAU. So for example, now we're on like the standing agenda for senior leadership meetings, where we have a CX update every month. And it's just part of normal business, where they come to expect either updates on KPIs, or if we do a deep dive into the data, we're part of the business versus trying to be something separate. So that's really made a difference. Also, finding CX champions. I mean, we all know there are some CX champions and some who don't really believe in CX as much. And so finding those who can support you and continue to put you on the agenda and remind people of the work that you've done has been really helpful for us. And in terms of demonstrating business value, so we've focused on this a lot, because that is one way to win over stakeholders. And so, we find the linkage where we can. So for example, detractors sold X million in sales last year, or they spend 3 times as much time on the phone, which we know drives costs, or they're more likely to surrender compared to promoters, or the top 50 firms, 10% of them are detractors. So anything to show that, yes, this is has a business value and that we do need to address these issues. And then again, telling the story. We've really done work to tell a concise story. We used to go from, 15 pages of slides to now we try to get to like 5 or 6. And we spend a lot of time telling the story and the so what of it. And then I think I'm most proud of not just telling the story, but having a solution. So for example, I talked about that call center deep dive that we did, and the pre-retirees who are calling about withdrawals, so that we know is a hotspot. And so we came up with a tool. Basically, we could notify advisors as soon as their client within that specific segment was calling about withdrawal. So basically, an alert to say, look, someone called in, follow up with them, make sure that they had a good experience. And so the full circle, the story, the so what, and then here's what you can do about it is how we've been able to gain some traction with our stakeholders.
Yeah, you talked about developing the KPIs, and this is actually one of the questions that we've gotten. So perhaps you can address this. We're struggling to develop KPIs to measure improvements in our CX, which, to help build that business case and that you've been talking about. Any advice for this person?
Yeah, so we have all the usual suspects of NPS, but we add like an extra filter. So NPS for a specific segment, or in the example, the 59.5 to 72, what's the call volume and the NPS for that segment? Other KPIs, they're always looking at trends. So that's really important for us, is providing the 6-month trend. We found that, NPS for that 1 month doesn't make a big difference, but how has it trended in the 6 months, and what's the benchmark? Where were you last year? That's been important for us to show, the goalposts. And I think those are the main ones, but really showing progress, or showing, the trends is important, and the benchmark. That comes up a lot, especially in our world. People will ask, well, what's everyone else doing? What are competitors doing? What's NPS like for them? And we always try to, recenter people and say, it's not about them, it's about us. And are we making improvements, or are we not? Are we at the level we want to be? And so we really do focus more on internally. Where were we a year ago? Is that where we want to be? Do we need to go up or down? Well, not down. Do we need to go up? So that's how we focus on those KPIs.
Yeah, and Vimeta, can you talk about this too? KPIs, some advice on for those who are struggling.
Yeah, so I think, like Kim said, KPIs are really, really critical, and customer, for customer experience, you're looking at, the churn rate, and the NPS score obviously is really critical. You also want to look at the customer satisfaction, and those, the standard KPIs that you have, and then, measure yourself against, how you're performing. So, you're like, you want to compare how were we doing last year compared to this year. So for us, when one of the things to get buy-in, for CX things, it's really important to really also show what the ROI is in that investment. A lot of times, and especially in large companies, CX is something that, a lot of people are not very familiar with, or they, it's a large organization. So a lot of times, when you're making the case for CX, why CX is really important, you need to go to the stakeholders, and you need to go to the right stakeholders and talk to them in their language. Like a CFO might be interested in, just understanding, how much is it going to cost us, and what will I get for this, right? Whereas a product person, might be just interested in, how will that person use CX, and what changes will that person need to make in their engineering team or their scrums, right? And service team might have a totally different, perspective on that. And so when you are making a case for CX, I think as CX leaders, it is really important to understand, why your program really matters, and, and show a business case and a ROI for that. And, to get really buy-in from the executive team. And so, so those are some of the things that I would say are critical when you are, how to demonstrate the business value for CX.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit more about the stakeholder support, and some of the tactics that you've used. You use the phrase of talking their language of the stakeholders. I think that's great reminder to everybody. Can you share how your team learned the language of other folks, or some of the other ways that they're really specific tactics of how they engage the support?
Yeah, so I think, when a lot of times, like I said, depending on who your stakeholder is, you need to speak their language and what really matters to them. So if you're talking to the CFO, they really they don't care about gut feeling. They care about the budget. How much are you going to spend, and what am I going to get out of it, right? So I think, convincing them and making a business case, speaking their language, what really they are looking for, I think that really definitely helps make a business case. If you're talking to a service team, how, they want to know how is the data being used to improve customer service. So you want to talk to them in their language and say, okay, these are the reasons why, we this is so important, and this is how it will impact your team. And this is how it, so similarly, for executives, if you're talking about, they are looking at a bigger picture, what will it get us? Will our customers be happier? And so when you're talking to them, you have to make a business case based on, what is important to that executive. And so I think those are some of the things, just really, and, I'll be honest with you, it's not very easy to when you're just starting out. There's so you really have to be usually having a small goal and kind of accomplishing that, working towards small goal, and then decide what success will look like in accomplishing that, and just starting from there, I think usually helps, because if you have very lofty goals and you're not going to be able to, so in my experience, I think having smaller goals, accomplishing them, and then moving to slightly larger, I think that really helps build a case. And and then people start trusting what you're saying, and they see it in data, with data and other things, so then it's an easier sell.
It's the kind of what you've just mentioned about starting with the small goal, sort of plays in perhaps to this question that we've gotten. What's the biggest mistake you've seen companies make in trying to improve their CX, and how did they get past us? Kim, are you able to answer this question, and some mistakes you've seen, and I guess how to avoid them?
Biggest mistakes around CX. I mean, I've only been in a few companies, but in terms of CX, I think for us as a team, a learning that we've come across is you cannot take forever to analyze your data. I think previously someone had told me that they spent 4 or 5 months trying to analyze the relationship survey data, trying to craft the perfect story, come up with all the different slides, all the different scenarios that someone might ask about. And so as you can imagine, whenever they reported it, it was old and it wasn't fresh, and people tend to discount it. And so I think there needs to be a balance between getting the data to your stakeholders, in a timely manner. It needs to be valid. It needs to, have some weight to it, but you can't take forever. And that's something we've definitely worked on, because the business is changing so quickly. And so the worst thing for us is to do all this work and nothing happens. Like that is my biggest pet peeve, is all the great work our team does and there's no action from it. And, I think this goes back to that stakeholder engagement, something that we've done across our team is we have one-on-ones, we have meetings before the meetings, plenty of meetings before the meetings with all the right people, getting their feedback and making sure we're doing the right analysis. I think that's the other piece, is we need to engage business stakeholders in the analysis at the beginning. Like, you can't do all the analysis and then show it to them at the end and present it. And they might not be along for the ride with you. And so getting their feedback on, what's the business outcome? How do you interpret this data? Does it make sense? Like, all of that is super important, and it helps to fast track the analysis. And so I would say that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen as quote unquote a failure, is analysis without action, which is just data.
Yeah, it's great advice. Another question, lots of questions, which is great. How often should you test and audit your chosen performance indicator to meet your desired objective? Vameta, any thoughts on this?
So how often, I mean, there is no set rule, but for us, usually we try to do it, at least once a quarter. For e-commerce, it's a little bit more straightforward because but I think once a year probably is a good idea to really just look at your KPIs and see are those still the correct ones, right? And if you need to make any changes to that, then you can go ahead and do that. Yeah.
Kim, and any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, and this is a work in progress for us, but we recently went through an IPO. We merged different BUs together, so we're trying to get to one set of KPIs, and really the goal is they don't change. Really key for us is tracking KPIs over time, and so we want to find KPIs that are sort of universal, if you will, and so the goal is to provide trending because that is important to business stakeholders to demonstrate is the business improving or not. And so I would say for us, we've really opted for the more universal KPI. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, they're just kind of timeless.
Yeah.
Another question on the multiple availability of KPIs. How do you determine which one to benchmark? You mentioned benchmarking is really important in your industry, Kim.
Yeah, NPS is the one that everyone knows within our company. And so that in itself is a win for us because it's one less conversation about like having to demonstrate the importance of it. So NPS is the one that we use. I mean, there's other ones obviously around customer effort and call holding time, but at the end of the day, the NPS is the one that gets the attention of people. And sorry, what was the second part of your question? Was it like around benchmark?
How do you determine which ones to benchmark?
Yeah. Yeah, NPS. I know it's not always the best KPI because there's others that tell you other things like satisfaction and customer effort score. But because NPS is so well known and it's something we've been tracking for a while, we have a lot of history on it. It's easier for us to do that and just support that with other data as needed based on the situation.
And Vimeta, any advice here for someone wanting to determine how to start benchmarking the KPIs?
I think, like Kim said, NPS is kind of the standard. We also look at, the customer churn rate. In the industry, there are some other ones that you can look at, customer satisfaction, direct traffic, page visits, average resolution time. So those are some of the other ones that are standard, but for us also the NPS is kind of the one that we mostly look at. But there are other ones that from a website perspective, obviously there are other KPIs that we look at, not just for CX, but just for marketing purposes as well.
And Vimeta, question on A/B testing platforms. Your teams are using any favorites with anything that you could recommend?
So currently we use the free version of Google Optimize, but we are moving to Target, which is Adobe's A/B test platform. So that's something, those are the two that we are using right now. Yeah, because I think Google is sunsetting their Optimize, so we are using Target as well. Just started using it.
And Kim, do you have any suggestions or?
No, that one's out of my wheelhouse.
Okay. Well, Vimeta, Kim, that brings us to the end of the session. This has been great. Thank you so much. I want to thank you both for chatting with us, for being so generous in giving us a glimpse into your respective companies and sharing so many actionable tactics and takeaways for folks here, and for sharing the great work that you're doing with CX improvements. So Eric, I'm going to turn it back over to you now.
Great. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, panel, for that insightful discussion. I also want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thanks once again.